Thank you very much. And first of all, I apologize for keeping you waiting. I won't make an opening statement per se, only to say that we've just had a very rich and constructive discussion with the AGOA ministers for the last couple of hours about how to think about AGOA going forward and what kinds of questions to ask as part of a review of how AGOA, what the experience has been with AGOA, what has worked well, and as we think about the renewal of AGOA going forward, what changes, if any, we may want to make. And I'm enormously grateful to the government of Ethiopia, to the African Union for hosting this meeting, for making all the arrangements for it, and it has been the beginning of what will be now a several-month process of reviewing AGOA with the objective of putting forward a proposal for its renewal to Congress before it expires in September 2015. And with that, I'm happy to open it up for questions.
Okay. Questions? Right here. Please say your name, and we need you to speak into this microphone right here.
Thank you very much. My name is Berhanu from local press agency, The Reporter. Well, my question directs to the amount of export that is originated to U.S., that when we see 95% of the export from sub-Saharan Africa is dominated from oil exporting countries. And only 5% of the sub-Saharan African enjoy agricultural commodities that is going to be exported to the U.S. Now, how realistic is Trade Africa coming out along with the AGOA, maybe extended? How realistic is your measure in that regard? Thank you very much.
Well, it's a very good question. Let me answer it in a couple of different ways. First of all, AGOA has been a success in a number of ways. Two-way trade has more than doubled. Exports of non-oil related products from sub-Saharan Africa to the United States have more than tripled. U.S. investment in sub-Saharan Africa is now at $40 billion and has grown dramatically over the last few years. And yet, I think we all agree that there's more to be done. And as we look ahead, we want to see the further development of non-oil, non-mineral related exports. There's a great desire among the other AGOA ministers to talk about how AGOA might be able to promote participation of African firms in global value chains, how it can promote regional integration, how it can promote more manufacturing or value-added production in the African continent with the objective of exporting to the United States. And those are all issues that we're going to want to look at as part of this AGOA review. You asked the question about Trade Africa. What Trade Africa is really all about is recognizing that reducing tariffs is not enough. Getting product out of Africa and out of one African country to another and from Africa to the global market is some of the most expensive and least competitive in the world. And that goes to roadblocks along the roads, it goes to issues in the port, it goes to border crossings and how to improve going to single border crossings or single customs systems that can talk to each other. And there are a number of things that can be done to try and facilitate intra-regional trade within Africa, but also improve the competitiveness of African exports to the global market. And so we see Trade Africa and AGOA very much as complementary. One is talking about access to the U.S. market, and the other is talking about how to make African products more competitive, both for the U.S. market, but for each other's markets and for the global market as well.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Okay. Why don't I go right there, please? Aaron. Let me give you a microphone.
Thanks. Aaron from Reuters. You've mentioned that a lot has to be done to boost these exports. Now, many African countries have their point of view, but in your mind, what do you think are the main bottlenecks from that happening?
The bottlenecks in terms of exports from Africa. Well, I think there are a number of issues around, for example, the regional integration. African countries themselves are engaged in a very robust effort to promote regional integration, your regional economic communities, the negotiation of the tripartite FTA, the aspiration of negotiating the continental-wide free trade area. Those all go to creating economies of scale that can make African firms more competitive and also encourage the diversification of product. So that would be a very good step forward, and one thing we want to talk about both in Trade Africa and in the AGOA context is what we can do to help support the regional integration efforts of our African partners. As I mentioned, there are issues around border crossings and logistics and roadblocks and the sorts of things when a product has to wait for a week or two to be unloaded at a port, or has to go through multiple roadblocks between the port and the next border, has to go through, waits at that border for several days before a truck can cross that border, and then when it crosses that border, faces another border crossing on the other side. Those all hurt the competitiveness of African products. They add costs. Sometimes they lead perishable products to rot and to be made worthless. Those are all the sorts of things that there could be concrete steps towards, and one thing we're doing through Trade Africa is looking to see what we can do to be supportive in that regard.
My name is Abdul Georgis from local media. Which media, please? Addis Ababa Mass Media Agency here in Addis. The Obama administration has an ambitious plan to provide energy to...
I'm sorry.
The Obama administration has an ambitious plan to provide power to the rural community in Africa through the Power Africa project. Does the project assess market viability? Is it affordable to the rural poor, the energy? Thank you.
So when President Obama was in Africa in June, he announced the Power Africa initiative. Right now, 2/3 of Africans don't have access to reliable, affordable sources of energy. It's 85% in rural areas. And what Power Africa intends to do is to bring together African governments who want to reform their energy and power sectors, put in place the appropriate regulation, make sure there are adequate tariff mechanisms and adequate collection mechanisms. It puts together donors like the United States who want to provide support for those reform efforts. And then very importantly, it brings to the table private sector investors who want to help develop those projects, develop the energy resources, and generation, distribution, and transmission. It looks to do not only production for the grid, but looking at mini-grid and off-grid solutions as well, including, as you mentioned, in rural areas. And if you noticed when he was in Tanzania, went to the Ubongo power plant in Dar es Salaam, he also was demonstrating a product that can provide electricity in an off-grid solution. So we want to look at the whole spectrum from the development of the newfound natural gas and oil resources to the development of hydro and geothermal and solar and wind capabilities, the development of the grid and the power pools and the linkages between them, but also the development of off-grid solutions.
Thank you, sir. I promised that we would go to our callers on the phone after this, and then if we have time, we'll come back to the room. So, David, it's over to you to moderate our incoming calls.
Thank you, Robert. This is David Benton. And I'm now going to ask for all of our callers to go ahead, and those who wish to enter the question queue will need to push *1 on their handsets to enter the question queue. So please take that action now. We'll wait just a moment here while we get the first callers into the question queue by pushing *1.
David, we can take another question.
If you have any questions, please push *1.
David, we'll take another question from here.
Very good.
Okay, so we'll go on from here. Please, right over there.
Well, actually, Robert, they just entered the queue here. So we will take the first question, if we would, then, from the U.S. Embassy in Ghana. U.S. Embassy Ghana.
Okay.
Your line is
ahead,
open.
please.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Eko Fanji. I write for the GhanaBusinessNews.com. Okay, my question is very simple. Is what the best trade policy that the U.S. is offering to Africa?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Please repeat the question.
Okay, I just want to ask that. Hello? Okay. I just want to ask that is about the fair trade policy that the U.S. offers to Africa.
Thank you. The question was, is AGOA the best trade policy the U.S. is offering Africa?
And the first trade policy, I believe.
Oh, the first? Okay. Well, you know, I think when AGOA was created back in 2000, I think it was a very important development in U.S.-African economic relations. It was not at all clear at that time that Africa's rise, its current rise that we're seeing now, would be coming about in quite the way it was. It was a bet on the future of Africa, and it was a successful bet. It has made some significant progress in improving trade and investment between the United States and Africa, but we think there's more that can be done to fulfill its full potential. So we do think that the renewal of AGOA in some form or another is appropriate, and that's what this review that we launched today is all about, to determine what kind of AGOA we want to see going forward. At the same time, it's not our only engagement on economic issues with Africa, and whether it's Power Africa or Trade Africa or our new alliance on food security and nutrition, or our ongoing work on global health, including treatment for HIV/AIDS. It's all part of a coherent whole about working with our African partners towards a healthy society that can feed each other, that can engage in greater value-added production and create jobs and participate in the global economy. And that's our goal for Africa. I think that's Africa's goal for itself, and we want to be a partner in that effort.
Thank you, sir. David, do you have another question in the queue?
Yes, we have our next question looks like is coming from U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi, Kenya, you'll be on next. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yes, my name is George Umandi from Nation Media Group. I wanted to ask a question regarding some comments attributed to Michael. He was widely quoted to have said that the U.S. is thinking about remodeling AGOA in the form of, in the nature of economic partnership agreement that Africa is negotiating with Europe. I just wanted to find out from Michael if the U.S. policy to make AGOA reciprocal. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I don't think we said our goal is to reform AGOA to be an economic partnership agreement. The questions I raised in my remarks this morning are just that. They're questions. They're questions I think we all want to look at ourselves, our stakeholders, business communities, private sector, civil society, African government partners, as we look at AGOA's renewal. I do think that there is a challenging issue before the African partner countries about how to work with us on a renewal of AGOA and how it relates to the negotiations that are ongoing with the European Union for economic partnership agreements. Because, again, without prejudging where our review comes out, I imagine there will be significant skepticism in the United States that we should allow one-way access to our market if our firms are being put at a disadvantage vis-a-vis firms from Europe or other countries. Again, those are the kind of questions that we want to look at in the context of this review.
Thank you. Thank you, David. We're going to take a couple more questions from the room here now. Okay? So please.
My name is Eskander from VOA Amharic. My question is, how does the U.S. intend to encourage more exports from African countries through AGOA? I mean, if this was one of the topics discussed during your meeting with the ministers.
Yes. No, it certainly was. And I'd say it covers everything from thinking about the renewal of AGOA and how to make sure that that's working even better than it has before, to ensuring that our trade hubs, we have 3 trade hubs in sub-Saharan Africa, are being utilized fully to promote two-way trade and investment in sub-Saharan Africa, to ensuring, as we talked about before, through Trade Africa, that we're doing everything we can to promote the competitiveness of products coming out of Africa so they can take full advantage of AGOA and participate potentially in global value chains. So we see this all part of a coherent package of looking to see both what the market access piece of trade policy is, but also these other pieces that are important to make sure that Africa can take full advantage of our trade policy.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a question from the back and then come up
here. Thank you very much. I'm Lalu Itala from Ethiopian Radio and Television Agency. One of the topest agenda in the 12th AGOA Forum is to set future directions, how AGOA will be extended, how AGOA will be worked in the future. What is the consensus between the trade ministers and the American government in the future? And especially, it's vested, the power is vested in the hands of the Congress, whether the AGOA will be extended or not. But many of the delegates I interviewed shared that they are optimistic the AGOA will be extended for some years. When the Congress will decide whether AGOA will be continued or not.
Thank you. Well, look, the first stage in that process is what's begun here just in the last 2 hours, which is the launch of this review on what, if any, changes we want to make to AGOA going forward. And there was a very good discussion. I'm very gratified by the feedback that I received from other AGOA ministers about what they'd like to see in AGOA going forward. And you've seen, I'm sure, the reports out from the AGOA ambassadors in Washington as well, where they asked for an extension, I believe, of 15 years and the third country fabric rule to be extended for the same period of time. And different ministers raised different issues in addition to those basic requests. But that's exactly what we're going to go through now, is having a discussion about the length of the extension, but also what kind of AGOA we want to see going forward. And we will work very closely with Congress, because ultimately it's a congressional prerogative to approve it. We're honored to have 2 key members of Congress here at the AGOA Forum today, Senator Isaacson and Congresswoman Bass, both of whom have been very active on Africa issues and AGOA issues. There has generally been a bipartisan consensus in favor of AGOA at the various other times that it's come up for modifications and for extensions. But I think the next step is looking at the review, evaluating how we want to proceed, and then we'll work closely with Congress to determine how best to move it forward.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more question from the room, and then if we have more questions on the queue, we'll go to the queue. So please, Aman.
Hi, I'm Aman from the Hindu India. I understand this is sort of the beginning of this process, but in your conversations with your counterparts in Africa, has there been any conversation about agricultural products like tobacco or sugar, and whether these should be allowed kind of access to U.S. markets under AGOA, and has there been any conversation about this? So
individual countries have raised issues about the scope of AGOA's coverage and whether additional products should be considered, including some of those products. And as I said in my remarks, we want to hear that feedback. We'll also talk candidly about what our sensitivities are, and we expect the same sort of candor from our trading partners as well.